Hello there, this is Dax. I'm just out for a walk this fine evening. It's about, I think it's about 11 o'clock at night right now, and I figured I'd just record some thoughts, see if anything interesting came up. So I saw something on television earlier today that really bothered me. There was a show on TV. I don't remember what the show was. I wasn't even watching it. I was doing my own thing, and I could hear it in the background. But there was a commercial that kept coming up every break of this show that I heard. And what it was a plastic surgeon advertising his breast augmentation services. What really bothered me about this is that he kept saying that it was about self-esteem. You come here and pay for my services and you will have more self-esteem. And what bothers me is that that's not what self-esteem is. If you've got self-esteem, then you're just not going to be bothered whenever somebody complains about your chest size or anything like that. The commercial just really bothered me because, well, basically, as a society, people are constantly promoting, they're constantly advertising low self-esteem. They're pushing low self-esteem because the lower your self-esteem is, the more money can be made off of you. And, completely as a side note, I'm walking along here once again. A sign is flashing away like crazy up in front of me, so I turn around. There's a gentleman out for his evening walk with his wheelchair, and he's got these crazy strobe lights all over it, so quite an interesting little distraction there. Anyway, back to what I was saying. As a society, it's easier to make money off of you if you've got low self-esteem. I don't know. I just find the whole thing very sad. If you can be convinced to have as low self-esteem as possible, then it's just easier to convince you to give someone your money because, get this done to you and you'll have better self-esteem. Or buy these clothes, you'll have better self-esteem. Have this car, you'll have better self-esteem, yada, yada, yada. Hate to break it to you, but if you have low self-esteem before you have it, then you'll also have low self-esteem after you have it, whatever it is. Doesn't matter if you're talking about a surgery, a designer, whatever worthless piece of junk it is that you've been convinced to buy or whatever. It's not going to change your self-esteem. Self-esteem is a choice. You either choose to like who you are or you don't. And admittedly, sometimes it's a difficult decision to make. I personally am a rather shy person. It's very difficult to overcome shyness, but still my being shy is a choice. The act of being shy is something that I choose to do. And I apologize for the train off here in the distance. Hopefully it's not too loud. I do happen to live near some railroad tracks that receive a lot of usage at night. But yeah, that commercial just bothered me. When I look at the human race, I see so much potential. I see a species that we could create a heaven on earth if that's what we decided we wanted to do. But we don't decide to do that. We don't choose to make the world around us better. We choose to divide each other into groups and hate each other and call other people stupid. We have no interest in what the other person actually has to say. We just want to beat them in the argument. And We could be so much better than that. We could do so much more if we'd only choose it. One of the things that I'm always tempted to say, and I say tempted to say this because I know it's not accurate. I know that it's not true. I have a tendency to say that the human race deserves better than what our leadership has provided for us. But that's a crock. You know, we deserve our leadership. We're the ones that put them in power. Sucks. It's not a pleasant thought. But the people who are in charge of the various countries, the world as a whole, we're the ones who put the fuckers in charge. So, yeah, the idea that the human race deserves better than what our leadership has provided for us, that's just not true. It's not true at all. We're the ones who put them there. George Carlin has this comedy routine that, well, he's got several of them that are just fantastic, but there's one in particular that I'm talking about here. And you can hop on pretty much any video website and find a bunch of George Carlin stuff. Just type in his name. But the one in particular that I'm talking about is where he's talking about the quality of people that become politicians and how he never blames the politicians because it is our fault. I agree with him completely on this, you know. Basically what the comedy routine of his does is it points out the fact that these politicians, these people that are ruining things for everybody, they didn't just come out of nowhere. You know, these are people who were once children, raised by American parents. They went to school in the American system, you know, and he goes through the whole routine and he basically points out, well, he blatantly points out that they are what we raised them to be. And that's an important point here. You know, as much as I'd like to say that we deserve better than what our leadership has provided, George Carlin is absolutely correct when he says, you know, bullshit to that. We created the leadership. We put them in power. It's our fault. And of course, I'm kind of deviating from George Carlin here and getting more into my own thoughts and points of view right now. We're the fuckers who put them in charge. You know, anytime the government sides with a corporation to somehow pollute the environment, that we're the people who put them in power. You know, Gandhi used to say, and he said this quite often, Gandhi used to say that a government only has as much power as its people agree to give it. And people will argue against this left and right. People will try so hard to play the victim role and go, no, the government is our oppressors, which they are our oppressors. I'm not saying they aren't. But people will go, oh, the government's our oppressors. We can't do anything about it because they're the ones in charge. You know, oh, poor us, we could never beat them or whatever. We could never change things. We could never bring about any important change. And then they proceed to turn right around and do something that basically gives the government permission to keep doing what it's been doing. A prime example of that, and I do not want this to lead to a bunch of political comments in the comment section. do me a favor, do us all a favor, don't do that. Please listen to the point that I'm making instead of going in there to start vomiting up whatever your opinion is about the current election. But there's something that's been happening in this election. You've got two candidates that hardly anybody likes. Hardly anyone likes either one of them. And the general attitude of most people is, well, you've got to vote for one of them. I want to vote for someone else. I want to vote for an independent candidate. But independent candidates never win because nobody votes for them. And it's a vicious cycle that they get into. Pardon me. There's a car that just drove by there. Probably heard that. But yeah, it's a vicious cycle. You know, people keep going, well, I want to vote an independent candidate, but independent candidates never win because nobody votes for them. And they don't even recognize that when you're doing that, you're part of the problem. I mean, you really are. Now, if you actually like one of the two candidates that are put forward by the two-party system, if you actually like one of them, then by all means, vote for them. Going back to the George Carlin thing, if you believe that if you vote you don't have the right to complain, then by all means, stay home and don't vote. That's your option too. But if you want to vote for one of the independent candidates, then you should vote for them. I don't know. I might just delete out this whole political section here because I don't want to get political on this particular video. All that I can really say about it is, if your excuse for not voting for the person you want to vote for is that you'll be wasting your vote because nobody votes for them, well, you're the problem. You're the problem. You're the reason nobody's voting independent candidates. So, if that's the route that you're wanting to vote, then do it. And don't you dare blame someone else for the person that gets elected if you're not even voting for the person you actually want. Anyway, I might leave this section in the video. I might not. I don't know. Might even clip it out and make it its own separate video. I just wish that people would start giving a shit about someone other than themselves. I wish that people would start making an effort to understand the people that they disagree with. Let's even take a break from talking about the other guy. Let's talk about you. Let's talk about you yourself. Wouldn't this be so much better a place to live if the people that you disagreed with would shut up for 5 lousy seconds to actually hear and understand what you are saying to them? I mean, that would be awesome if people would listen to you, right? I mean, because you've got opinions. You're an important person. You might be right, you might be wrong, but you're still important either way. But you're an important person. Wouldn't it be nice if people actually listened to you? Well, virtually every truly profound spiritual path that the human race has ever produced has always said basically the same thing. And that is that if you want to change the world, you have to change yourself. You have to change yourself first. There's one in particular that describes it as simply being, be harsh on yourself while being lenient on everyone else. This is a very important thing to consider, because after all, how can you honestly expect anybody to listen to you and take you seriously if you're not willing to listen to anyone else and take them seriously. So remember to work on yourself. Think about what kind of a wonderful place this world could be if we all just listened to each other. And then remember that you can make it that world if you start with yourself. Yeah? Change who you are. Make yourself into a person who listens to the other guy. The person that you disagree with. The person that you don't want to listen to. Fucking listen to them. Might not be pleasant, especially in the beginning. It's a skill, just like anything else. You have to train for it. You have to build up your ability to listen to and respect people that you disagree with. You know, same way a bodybuilder has to lift weights slowly and build up the weight. Well, I don't know. That might not be the best description, but the point being is you have to learn how to do it. It is a skill that has to be built up. But yeah, be harsh on yourself. Be lenient on everyone else. Right now I'm looking at the most amazing thing. It's a very simple thing, but it's absolutely amazing. Street lamp up here on a power line. The light is facing the other direction, so the light's not shining at me, but I can see the light shining off to the side, and there are a bunch of insects flying around it. And there was one particular moth where the light was just constantly hitting it just right, where it was this amazing, glorious flare. He looked like a shooting star orbiting this light. It was pretty amazing. Life is full of little things like that if you take the time to notice. It's easy to get caught up in our lives. It's easy to be self-important about things that really don't matter. But yeah, life is full of just a bunch of amazing little things like that. Truly phenomenal little events that can just absolutely dazzle you as long as you're not caught up in the minutia of your day-to-day living, you know, whatever drama is demanding your attention and screaming at you, I'm important, and then, you know, a week later you forgot that it ever even happened. You know, that shit there, as long as you don't get caught up in it, life will throw you all kinds of amazing little treasures for you to notice. You know, just a simple moth flying around a light turns into a shooting star just because of, you know, the position of where you're standing from it, the light that's hitting it. Just amazing little things like that. One time I was out for one of these walks and I was sitting on a bridge just listening to the water ripple beneath me. And off to the side I see this coyote, just wandering across the street, hanging out. I also see a lot of deer out on these walks. A lot of deer. I'm not certain why, but there does seem to be a herd of deer that live in this neighborhood. I used to live in the country. I went to high school. I lived in the country. Now, from the ages of about 7 to 18, I lived out in a country, or out in the country. And then, a while later, there for about 5 to 10 years, I lived out in the country again. In either case, I never saw anywhere near as many deer as I have since moving to this neighborhood. I mean, they're everywhere. So you'll hear me bring up a lot of different animals in my discussions with these videos. You'll especially hear me talk a lot about coyotes or coyotes. It's a regional thing, which one they're called. Here where I currently live, they're called coyotes. But coyotes, coyotes, same thing. But you'll hear me talk a lot about coyotes. You'll hear me talk a lot about deer, rabbits. There's a car coming. But yeah, you'll hear me talk about a lot of different kinds of animals. You'll probably hear me talking about deer and coyotes and maybe rabbits more than anything else. Dogs and cats will be mentioned quite a bit. I am a very spiritual person. That is one thing that I want anyone who's listening to these videos to realize. I'm a spiritual person. Life is a spiritual journey. The reason why I bring that up right now is I do hold to the Native American beliefs of animal totems. That animals have animal spirits and that they have a profound connection with us. If you don't believe this too, that's fine. You feel free to have those beliefs. I don't give a shit. But you'll hear me bring them up quite a bit. So a lot of times when I'm talking about animals, whether I actually bring this up as a point or not, I'll be discussing it from the standpoint of a Native American totem animal. And whenever people discuss these totem animals, they always go, I'm not even certain of the terminology. I'm just BSing stuff right now, but you'll hear people talk about, oh, well, I've got bear to my east, and my main totem is the wolf, and blah, 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 blah. And they'll go on about this stuff. I don't know, there might be something to that. I don't know what my main animal totems are. I don't even know how to find out. Not really interested in finding out either. That doesn't seem to be a part of my path. No, for me, animals just seem to have souls. They seem to have oversouls. And those oversouls seem to take an interest in me. Anyway, yeah, I will be discussing a lot of spiritual things on this series. I'll be discussing experiences I've had. Once again, you can feel free to believe it or not. You can feel free to have whatever opinion of me that you want, under the condition that you're respectful. If you're respectful, I invite you to stay around. But I'll be discussing things that I've done, things that I've seen, things that I hope to do, and in general, my basic philosophies on life and the world around me. Those crickets are sounding beautiful tonight. I don't know if you can hear them in this recording, but they just sound majestic. So I thought I'd take a little bit of time and talk about the time that I visited the ECETI Ranch. The ECETI Ranch, that was a fun place. I really enjoyed myself there. For those of you who do not know the ECETI Ranch, it's also known as the UFO Ranch. It's owned by a man named James Gilliland. If you're curious about him at all, you can type in his name and find all kinds of stuff about him. But yeah, he owns this ranch where people can go out there and do a UFO watch. People will say different things about James Gilliland himself. You know, some people are full supporters of him, others think he's total crap. There are people that believe that he's for real, but he's well, I'll be nice and say they think he's a flawed person. I can understand all those different points of view. For me, when I went there and I met him, my basic opinion of the man is he was a human being with faults and flaws, but he seemed to be for real. I always hear armchair skeptics typing in things about Mr. Gilliland and his ranch and trying to discredit it. And when you've been there and then you see some of the things that people type out in order to discredit it, I'm sorry, people are not stupid, but they do some stupid things. And a lot of the things that these people are typing out in order to try and discredit the ranch, it's retarded. Not a PC term, but that's what it is. Their attempts to discredit the ranch, it's retarded. You know, they'll try to say that, oh, well, there's a guy out on the mountain firing out these lights, or they'll try to turn it into like some drones flying overhead and all of that stuff. And what I saw out there, how are you tonight? Better than I should be. You have a good one. Gentleman over there getting out of his car and going into his house for the evening. But anyway, the things that I saw there at that ranch, first of all, this place had more air traffic than I've ever seen anywhere. I have never seen a place that had anywhere near this much air traffic. And you look up the ECETI Ranch on the internet, and everyone's talking about the stuff you see at night. I saw a lot of activity during the day. I mean, I was at the ECETI Ranch for about a week. And I would just lay there on my back and look up at the sky. And there were these little metallic craft just crisscrossing the sky like crazy. They were everywhere. Now, one argument that a person can make is, well, you're only an hour outside of Seattle. Okay? No airport has that much traffic. There was a lot of stuff up in that sky moving around up there. But at night, of course, that's when the real light show begins. I would see objects flying through the sky, make a 90-degree turn in the middle of the air, going up and out into space. I mean, they'd be flying along horizontally, 90 degrees straight up. And I would see vehicles doing that constantly when I was there. One of the most interesting things that happened to me when I was at the ECETI Ranch, and people who know me, they've heard this story a million times, but, well, I really liked the event. It was pretty cool. One of the things about the ranch, James Gilliland claims that there is a major spaceport inside the mountain that his ranch is at the foot of. and let the reason for all the activity is that you've got all these extraterrestrials using that spaceport inside that mountain. So that's background information for the story. So I was standing there at the ranch, watching all the different craft moving around, and there were people over there to my right with computer systems set up, and they were using it to track all the different craft that we saw in order to first identify whether they were a spacecraft or space station, satellite, airplane, whatever. Because they, contrary to what people like to believe about these guys, they're not willing to believe just anything. They were wanting to make certain that any UFOs we were looking at really were craft that could not be accounted for. So there were people off there to the side that had their tracking equipment up, and they were identifying satellites and airplanes, and, oh, what's that bright light that just moved across the sky? Oh, that's the International Space Station. Don't worry about it. Oh, okay. But there were also more craft out there that they couldn't account for. So I was watching all these vehicles out there, and the woman that was standing right next to me, very sweet lady, she happens to mention to me, Dax, there's a way that you can tell whether or not the light that you're looking at is an alien spacecraft. And so I go, okay, how do you tell if the vehicle I'm looking at is an alien spacecraft? And she mentions to me, almost all extraterrestrials are psychic. You can think a yes or no question at an alien UFO, and they will flash their lights back at you in response. Once for yes, twice for no. Okay, so she mentions that, you can think a yes or no question at them. Just as she says this, I see a light come shooting out of the mountain, going straight up into the sky. And without even thinking about it, this all happened much faster than I'm describing it. It's like she gives me that description about the yes or no questions, and then boom, I see this. And this light goes shooting out of the mountain straight up into the sky. And I just absent-mindedly said out loud, did I just see a spaceship fly up out of that mountain? And the mountain flashes its light at me. So anyway, I thought that was pretty cool. But I really enjoyed my time there at the ECETI Ranch. My general attitude when I went out there, I intentionally kept my expectations low. I didn't go out there to see a giant hubcap in the sky. I just went out there to enjoy a week-long camping trip, and anything else that happened, happened. I met some of the coolest people there. I really liked the people that I met at this place. And the whole ranch just felt really good. It felt really good to just be there. And I wasn't the only one who felt it. Other people that were there remarked about it too. But yeah, that was my time at the ECETI Ranch, and that's an example of some of the things that my spiritual adventure, for lack of a better term, has kind of led me to go do. Right now, I'm planning a couple of other trips. We'll see if they happen. I know that I will be traveling somewhere simply because I've made the decision to do it, but how long it takes me and where I'm going, that's what's up in the air. That's the question. I would really like to go see Iceland. The reason why I want to go see Iceland is because of the strength of their fairy lore. their fairy tales in Iceland are still very powerful. The people there are allowed to believe in fairies and trolls and gnomes. And that's the real reason why I want to go to Iceland. I want to go there and I want to learn firsthand about this stuff from people. I'd also like to go to the Philippines, but the Philippines are kind of becoming a trendy hotspot these days. There's a lot of people going to the Philippines these days. But I'd still like to go there nonetheless. I would like to take another trip to Mexico. I recently took a trip to Mexico, and I posted some videos about some of the things that I saw and did there. I had to cut my Mexico trip short, though. Once again, I am a very spiritual person. When my instincts are telling me something, I fucking listen to them. And when I was in Mexico, I was there for about 3 weeks. I had intended to be there a few months, and that would start a backpacking trip. But as it turned out, I was only there 3 weeks. My instincts just started buzzing on me like crazy. I just kept getting this instinctive vibe saying that something was going to happen if I stuck around and that I'd better head home ASAP. Once again, when my instincts are telling me something like that, I listen, or at least I try to. Anyone who's ever dealt with this phenomena knows that sometimes you're a better listener than others. But I tried to listen to them on this. And my instincts were screaming at me when I was there. Everything was just fine for about the first 2.5 weeks. But there, the last couple of days that I was there, my instincts just kept screaming at me. They were saying, you need to get the fuck out of here. See, because my trip, when I went to Mexico, it was not a resort. I went to a real Mexican town, got to know some beautiful, wonderful people. But, Mexico is basically run by the drug cartels, and there were cartel people there too. And about 2.5 weeks in, my instincts just started screaming at me, yo, Dax, get your gringo ass home. Something bad is going to happen if you stay here. So I left. I felt bad for it because it was very abrupt when I left. And I'm worried that some of these people that I met down there might have been offended with the abruptness that I left. But, I'm sorry if they're offended by it. I certainly didn't mean any offense. But, like I said, my instincts were telling me I needed to get out of there. Something bad was going to happen to me if I stayed around, and so I listened to my instincts and I left. And the thing is, I noticed that people did not understand. People were asking me, because, I kind of made the announcement that I was going to have to head home that day. I didn't lie. I didn't make any excuses. A bunch of people were lying and making excuses on my behalf, which I don't understand. People were making excuses for me, saying, oh, well, he has to go back to work or whatever. But, people would ask me, why are you leaving all of a sudden? And I was honest. I told them blatantly, my instincts are telling me I'd better get out of here. And the locals had no clue what that was about. I got back here to the States, and I mentioned that, I came back early because my instincts were telling me to leave, and The average response from people in the States here seems to be, well, yeah, if your instincts are telling you, you've got to listen to your instincts. But down in Mexico, I don't know if it was a language thing or a cultural thing or what, but, even people that spoke pretty good English could not grasp that the reason I was leaving was because my instincts were telling me I was in danger. They couldn't believe that was the reason. There had to be something else. There was one poor guy that actually got in trouble because people were not simply taking my word for it that was the reason I was going. I was hanging out in my little shack, my little place where I was staying, and there were a couple of guys outside that were playing their music loud. To be perfectly honest with you, the walls were good enough, I didn't even hear them. But they were out there playing their music loud, and there was a guy who lived nearby who was pissed off at them, and apparently he shows up with a gun and threatens them to, shut off the music or else. The point being, I was not even there. And this was happening at the same time that my instincts were screaming at me, so the timing was kind of funky. This particular guy wasn't dangerous. He was just trying to scare these kids into shutting their music off. But I wasn't even there. And yet I was in the hour or so before I left town to take the bus back to the U.S. border. I had the town magistrate ask me about this whole situation, and people were telling him that this guy with the gun who was angry at the kids playing their music was the reason I was going home. No, I told you why I'm going home. I'm going home because my instincts are telling me to go the fuck home. There is nothing more or less to it than that. Your instincts exist to protect you. If your instincts are telling you you're in danger, listen to them. But they couldn't accept this as the answer. Even the people that felt pretty protective over me, because there were a lot of those. There were a lot of good people that were looking out for me. They enjoyed my company. I enjoyed theirs. But even the people who were, for lack of a better term, on my side, I don't like that terminology, but the people that were looking out for me, they couldn't accept that this was the reason that I was leaving. It had to be the guy that was angry at the people out there for playing the loud music. Apparently I was out there with them, even though I was sitting in my room. I was trying to determine whether it really was my instincts telling me to go, or if it was some other thought in my head that was kind of muddling the message. But yeah, I was in there trying to listen to my instincts. And I didn't even know that any of this stuff was happening until after it was over with. It had to be the next morning when people were going, so what did you think of that racket last night? And my honest response was, I have no idea what you're talking about. But yeah, people were positive that this was the real reason why I was heading home early. And as much as I loved these people, it was getting on my nerves that people were not just simply... The honest answer couldn't have been the honest answer as far as they were concerned. They kept twisting everything I was saying to turn it into something that it was not. And I really don't understand why people do that. But as far as the instincts go, once again, I don't know if it was a cultural thing or a language thing or what it was. You know, there was a group of people that were very good at speaking English. I was horrible at Spanish. I've always been horrible at languages. You know, I was down there. I did everything I could to pick stuff up, but I was still horrible at speaking Spanish. But there were enough people there that spoke really nice English that I just don't understand how it could have been a language issue. Well, I think that's going to be it for tonight. I wish you guys the very best. I love you all. Take care.